So the usual suspects, The Guardian this time, they've decided to write their article about Harry and Meghan's tour. However, I tell you, when you look at the headline and then you read the body of the article, they always tell on themselves, because in the body of the article is always buried a very important detail that is the truth. So if you get rid of all the fluff, all the gumph, all the usual, oh my God, how can they do that? The weeping, the wailing, the mourning, the throwing up, crashing out, sliding down the walls and whatever it is they do, there's a detail there. So remember the headlines of this was an ATM tour, they're trying to cash in on their royal titles and they're trying to do this or that. And people forget, and I'm going to keep reminding them every time I remember, that Harry and Meghan wrote and they offered back the titles. But the royal family or the courtiers or whatever, the Queen or whoever, as in the Queen Elizabeth that is, they did not take the titles. They refused to take the titles. So all this, strip them of their titles, strip them of their titles. Their superpower is not in their titles. Their superpower is in themselves. But don't let me get distracted. So as they said, oh my God, they went to make money. And that was the argument that's being made by the Daily Mail, the Telegraph, the BBC, the Guardian, all of them. Oh my God, they're grifters. They're this, they're that, they're the other. Well. They also tried to tell us that all the charity work was window dressing for the money-making operation. I don't think people understand one thing. The era that we live in right now, the world we live in right now, you can make millions from your bedroom. If you are strategic enough and you are savvy enough, you can make millions from your bedroom. There are YouTubers out there making so much money every day. I'm on YouTube myself. And I'm still trying to get to grips with how this works in terms of monetizing and blah, blah. I have no idea. I have no clue. I'm probably the worst person to be talking about this. But one thing I do know is that there are people out there who are making money from their bedrooms. And it's easier, as in, what, not easy, but it's easier to do so nowadays than before. So my point is, Harry and Meghan don't even have to leave their ocean view, beautiful property in Montecito, where it's sunny all the time, with the roses and the orchards and the chickens and all that malarkey. They don't have to leave their homes to make a shed load of money. So when they say visiting Australia is a cash, treating Australia as a cash machine, it's a money-making operation, that is disingenuous, number one. Number two, they forget that the grifters in chief are the ones living in palaces. They're the ones who barely do any work, but are collecting millions every year. They are the slumlords collecting money from the NHS, from the armed forces, from charities, yes. Collecting money for an empty, toxic, disused prison to the tune of millions. But let me get back to what I was trying to say. In the article that was written by The Guardian, there was a detail. And if you think about it, this is a couple. They came to Australia. They flew commercial, visited, because I want to recap, visited a children's hospital, women's shelter, mental health charities, spoke with Bondi shooting survivors, did the Inter-Edge keynote. It was a packed agenda. They did in 4 days what the other girl and the other brother, and I'm not exaggerating here because this is proven, they did in 4 days what the other brother and other girl do in 4 months, and that is the truth. So anyway, if the goal, and this is the crux of my thing, if the goal was to maximize commercial extraction from Australia, if indeed they wanted to treat Australia like a cash machine, they would have taken an offer. There was an offer made by Max Markson. Max Markson is a PR guru. He offered them millions of dollars for 2 events, right? And they would have walked away with millions of dollars. There would have been no hospital visits. there would have been no women's shelters, there would have been no Scar Tree Walk, there would have been no beta sessions with young people from rural Australia, there would have been no Bondi shooting survivors meeting, there would have been no standing ovation from 300 women at a retreat that paid for the team's travel costs and nothing more. She could have been in and out in 2 days with $1 million in the bank. Yes, because this guy made the offer and they turned him down. But you will not see that in the press, would you? Instead, what we are getting every single day is the whinging and the moaning. Why don't you leave them the heck alone? And many people are forgetting that the late Queen Elizabeth herself wrote that with permission, they can now pursue their own commercial interests. They can pursue their own private commercial interests. And they can also do their own private charity work. They gave up the patronages. So good luck to the patronages. Good luck with who you have now, because it's certainly not Harry and Meghan. And you know, with Harry and Meghan in charge, they would at least make sure that you get some money in. And yet, despite the fact that off their own back, they decided we will do a lot of charity visits while we are in Australia, including Invictus. Despite that, despite not getting paid for MasterChef, despite not getting paid for the keynote speech that Harry made, they are still whinging and moaning. The Guardian article also quotes Max Markson saying that whether the coverage has been negative or positive, it doesn't matter because the Sussexes have made a noise. You see, this is the whole point. This is because when it comes to PR, a lot of PR professionals believe that there is no such thing as positive PR or negative PR, because all PR, as long as it makes a noise, as long as people are made aware of what's going on. And this is the assessment of a man whose professional world is built around the proposition that attention equals value. And it doesn't matter what kind of attention it is. It doesn't matter the quality of the attention. This is why when trolls come to my channel and they leave the most absurd comments, sometimes I just, block and delete straight away. I just hide them from my channel because, can't be dealing with that. But sometimes I leave it there because I'm thinking a lot of people have already responded to them and it's engagement. I'll leave it. And that is how you need to look at the world of PR. Because right now, whether you hate Harry and Meghan, whether you love Harry and Meghan, everybody is talking about Harry and Meghan to the point that a rotor rat crashed out because the king briefed about his visit to Washington and no one gave a toss because attention was back on Harry and Meghan. And like I said, attention goes to where the interest flows. There is a lot of interest in Harry and Meghan right now. That is why this Max Markson himself offered Meghan $1 million to do an event. And she said no. And think about it this way, right? I believe that this guy said what he said because at the end of the day, he's thinking as a PR professional, if it was him, he would have taken the $1 million, done the 2 days and left, right? But he was thinking that what Harry and Meghan were doing, it was 4 days of genuine and substantive engagement with Australian community and causes. Because whether people like it or not, the Meghan effect on those fashion brands alone, it's been real. The other girl in her Caribbean tour, she cannot claim the same. And she still cannot claim the same. Also, there is the question, right, of what that $1 million offer to Meghan, what it reveals in terms of what Meghan's time and presence is worth in commercial terms. So if you invite me to speak at an event, I don't know. I mean, no, I don't think anyone's ever going to pay me $1 million to speak at an event. I can only hope. But for this guy to offer Meghan $1 million as a PR professional, he knows that he would at least generate 10 times that value back from her presence. Because celebrity PR agents, they do not offer $1 million speculatively. They offer it because they believe that the commercial return on the investment is enough to justify the fee. $1 million is what he and the market determined that Meghan's presence is worth, right? So if she does 2 commercial events, then her presence is worth $1 million. And mind you, that $1 million doesn't include, I believe, the cost of security, the cost of travel, the hotel, the this, the that, the other. Personally, with the way things are, I think Meghan can easily ask for at least 5 million if she wanted. She can ask for 5 million right now. I truly believe so. And it depends on how the deal is structured and how it's stacked. Because by the time you add all your costs, it could very well be 5. I believe she's worth 5 million. And when somebody said, oh, she's been, a lot of publishers are offering her a deal to write her book, blah, 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 blah. Me, I'm like, nah, if it's not 9 figures, forget about it. 8 figures is great. But I feel if it's not 9 figures, not worth it. Not worth it at all. So until they can offer her 9 figures, then we're talking. Because at the end of the day, they will get their money back. So all I know is that Meghan came, Harry came, they saw, they conquered, and they left Australia a better place. And many people in Australia, and I've always said this, ordinary people in Australia who love them and like them and gave them a fair go, I just want to say a huge thank you, because you dumbfounded and you actually flabbergasted and I would say even busted the brains of the British media who thought it was going to be, or rather they didn't think, who hoped that they had done enough damage for the tour to be a disaster, and it wasn't. So I just want to say thank you to the Australian population. But anyway, let me know what you think in the comments, please. My name's Elizabeth. I'm the author of The Lotspreneur. And for more insights like these, please like, share, comment, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And to support my work in holding truth to power, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Elizabeth Solaru, or you can get a copy of my book, The Lotspreneur, from Amazon, Waterstones, or Barnes & Noble.
The $1 million rejection that redefines the narrative. A crucial detail emerges from the coverage of Meghan's Australian engagement that fundamentally undermines every cynical interpretation that has circulated about her visit. Max Markson, a prominent Australian celebrity PR agent, had previously offered Meghan $1 million and a private jet to visit Australia for 2 commercial events. She declined. This single fact, buried in the reporting, deserves to be brought into sharp focus because it exposes the central flaw in the cash machine narrative that dominated headlines. The argument being advanced by major outlets is that Harry and Meghan came to Australia primarily to exploit their royal proximity for financial gain, with their philanthropic work serving merely as cover for a mercenary operation. Yet the public record shows that when someone offered Meghan exactly what the cynical narrative claims she was chasing, $1 million for minimal commitment, she said no. Not, let us discuss, not, we will consider it, but a straightforward refusal. 4 years later, she returned on a commercial Qantas flight and spent 4 days visiting a children's hospital, a women's shelter, Indigenous veterans ceremonies, mental health charities, and shooting survivors, while delivering 2 keynote speeches and announcing an international sports festival for wounded veterans, largely without commercial compensation. The Her Best Life retreat and one-off investment provided some revenue, certainly, but the total commercial value generated on this tour fell substantially short of the $1 million sitting on the table that she rejected. The question the $1 million offer answers is not whether Meghan wanted to profit from Australia, but rather what her presence is actually worth in commercial terms. And the fact that she walked away from it to do substantive work instead reveals everything about her priorities and contradicts the machine's predetermined judgment. The $1 million offer that revealed everything. Max Markson, a prominent celebrity PR agent operating in Australia, had previously extended a substantial offer to Meghan, $1 million and the use of a private jet in exchange for her participation in 2 commercial events. She declined the offer outright, without negotiation or counter-proposal. This single detail, buried within The Guardian's coverage of the Australian tour, fundamentally undermines the ATM tour narrative that has dominated headlines throughout the week. The offer was straightforward and lucrative, the kind of proposition that, if Meghan's primary motivation were financial extraction, would have been impossible to refuse. Yet she refused it. She did not request revised terms. She did not ask for time to consider. She simply said no to $1 million and a private jet, choosing instead to return to Australia years later on a commercial Qantas flight in business class to spend 4 days visiting hospitals, shelters, and community organisations without the guaranteed financial cushion that had been offered to her. This refusal stands as the most powerful evidence against the cynical framing that has defined media coverage of her visit, because it demonstrates that when given the choice between easy money and substantive engagement, Meghan chose the latter, and in doing so exposed the fundamental dishonesty of a press apparatus determined to portray her unfavourably regardless of her actions. The ATM tour narrative. How media outlets weaponize commercial framing. The narrative that dominated coverage of the Australian tour, a story of calculated financial extraction wrapped in a thin veneer of charitable concern, was constructed with remarkable consistency across Britain's most prominent news organisations. The Daily Mail, The Telegraph, the BBC, and The Guardian all seized upon the grifter framing, a unified messaging strategy that transformed 4 days of substantive community engagement into something far more sinister in their collective telling. What made this framing particularly potent was its implication that the philanthropic work, the hospital visits, the women's shelter, the mental health charity partnerships, the Invictus sailing event, were nothing more than elaborate window dressing, calculated optics designed to obscure what these outlets insisted was the tour's true purpose, extracting maximum commercial value from royal adjacent status. The machine had decided its story, and it would not be moved by inconvenient details. Yet buried within The Guardian's own coverage was a detail that fundamentally undermined this entire argument, a fact so damaging to the ATM narrative that it warranted extraction from its obscure placement and repositioning where it could do the work it was always meant to do, revealing not what Harry and Meghan came to Australia to take, but what they had deliberately refused. The rejected offer contradicts the cash grab narrative. The evidence that undermines this entire ATM tour argument is straightforward and damning. Meghan could have accepted Max Markson's $1 million offer and departed Australia in 48 hours, yet she chose a fundamentally different path. Instead of taking the private jet and the guaranteed 7 figures, she spent 4 days engaged in substantive community work, visiting a children's hospital, meeting with women's shelter residents, attending an Indigenous veteran ceremony and participating in mental health charity events and Bondi shooting survivor gatherings. The irony is inescapable. If commercial extraction were truly the goal, the math would have been elementary. 2 events, $1 million, done. No hospital crowds, no women's shelters, no Scar Tree Walk, no community sessions. But Meghan walked away from that deal and returned years later to do the actual work instead. What revenue the tour did generate, from the Her Best Life retreat and one-off investment announcements, amounted to considerably less than the figure she had already rejected. The woman who turned down a guaranteed $1 million and a private jet ended up breaking even on a 4-day trip that delivered the largest hospital engagement crowd Victoria Ward had ever witnessed, and a standing ovation from 300 women. That simple fact demolishes the entire premise that this was a cynical cash operation. The money was offered. She declined it. And in its place she chose 4 days of genuine substantive engagement with Australian communities instead. The 4 days of actual work. Over the course of 4 days, Meghan and Harry engaged in substantive on-the-ground work across multiple Australian communities and causes. They visited a children's hospital where Victoria Ward witnessed the biggest crowd such an engagement had ever drawn, and a women's shelter demonstrating a commitment to vulnerable populations. They attended an Indigenous veteran ceremony at the Australian War Memorial, participated in a mental health charity event, met with Bondi shooting survivors to offer support and solidarity, and attended an Invictus sailing event that showcased adaptive sports for wounded veterans. Beyond these in-person engagements, they also made free appearances, performing on MasterChef without compensation and delivering the Inter-Edge keynote at no cost, choosing to contribute their time and platform to causes rather than extract commercial value from them. This was not a schedule designed to maximize profit. It was a schedule designed to deliver genuine substantive engagement with Australian communities, the kind of work that cannot be rushed through a private jet in 2 days, the kind of work that requires presence and attention and the willingness to show up even when there is no financial incentive to do so. The commercial reality of the Australian engagement, the Her Best Life retreat, generated modest revenue that covered the team's travel costs and little more. Yet this modest commercial activity has been weaponized by critics who seem determined to paint the entire tour as a money-grabbing exercise, regardless of the actual evidence. The one-off investment announcement represented genuine commercial activity, a legitimate business venture that deserves acknowledgement as such. But when one examines the numbers with any degree of honesty, the picture that emerges is strikingly different from the ATM tour narrative that has dominated headlines. The total revenue generated across all commercial activities on this 4-day visit fell conspicuously short of the $1 million offer she rejected years earlier, an offer that came with a private jet and required only 2 days of her time. Yet she walked away from it entirely. This is the crucial detail that recalibrates everything. Meghan could have extracted far more commercial value from Australia by simply accepting what was already on the table. Yet she chose instead to return years later and do the work, breaking even on a trip that included substantive engagement with hospitals, shelters and communities across the country. What the offer reveals. The $1 million offer from Max Markson was not made lightly or speculatively. Celebrity PR agents do not distribute such substantial fees without rigorous calculation of return on investment, and the figure itself served as market validation of Meghan's commercial value at that precise moment in time. $1 million represented what the marketplace determined her presence at 2 Australian events was worth before she ever set foot on the country's soil. Yet here lies the crucial distinction that dismantles the ATM narrative. She declined it. Not with conditions or counteroffers, but with an outright refusal. She chose instead to return years later on a commercial flight, to spend 4 days with children in hospitals and survivors of violence and rural young people struggling with mental health, to announce a new international sports festival for wounded veterans at the Australian War Memorial. The Her Best Life retreat and one-off affiliate commissions generated modest revenue, enough to cover the costs of flying a 9-person team across the world and back, nothing more. This was considerably less than the $1 million sitting on the table, waiting. If the objective were maximum commercial extraction, the mathematics of the choice become irrefutable. Take the private jet, take the $1 million, execute 2 events, depart in 2 days with the cash secured. Instead, she walked away from the easy money and returned to do the actual work. The impossible standard. The cruel irony embedded in this entire narrative is that there exists no scenario in which Meghan's actions receive media benediction. Had she accepted Markson's $1 million offer, the easy money, the private jet, the 2-day sprint in and out of Australia, the same outlets currently wielding the ATM accusation would have pivoted seamlessly to decrying her as a mercenary, a charlatan cashing in on royal proximity for a quick commercial payday. Instead, she rejected the straightforward path to maximum profit and returned years later to invest 4 days in genuine community engagement. Hospital visits, shelter support, veteran ceremonies, mental health advocacy. Yet this deliberate rejection of easy money, this tangible demonstration of commitment to substantive work over commercial extraction, somehow transmutes into the very charge she avoided. The media's assessment reveals its own impossible standard. There is no version of Meghan's choices that the machine approves of, because the machine has already determined its verdict. The $1 million she declined becomes the very proof of her authenticity, the evidence that when confronted with the choice between maximum extraction and meaningful engagement, she selected the latter. And still the narrative persists that she came to Australia as an ATM operation, even though she walked away from an actual $1 million to do something far more valuable than money could measure.